Hello everyone, we're Rahul Naya with the Golden Gate Lotus Club, and we're here with Chris Locke, who is a long-time GGLC member, Historic Grand Prix racer, and we're at Laguna Seca for the Monterey Motorsports Revival. Chris, thanks for taking the time to talk to us.
Happy to do it.
So we're here because Chris has three cars that he's going to be racing this weekend, but the one we're probably most interested in is this one right here. This is a Lotus 77. In fact, this is a Lotus 77 that has a bit of an illustrious history. Chris, do you want to say a little bit about it?
Sure. This was a car driven by Mario Andretti in 1976, which was Andretti's first full season with Lotus. It was not the most successful Lotus Formula One car that Andretti drove by far, but it was kind of a test bed for a lot of innovations that led to ground effects the next year and the World Championship the year after that, 1978, when Andretti won the World Championship. And Andretti did drive a Lotus 77 to one Grand Prix victory, the Japanese Grand Prix in 1976, and he finished in the points in this car in about 6 Grand Prix that year. So it was moderately successful, and they did a lot of experimentation with side pod design that year, which resulted in the ground effects car the following year.
Yep. And I should also mention that the win that he had in the Japanese Grand Prix was by an entire one lap, which is not something you see in modern Formula One anymore.
Right, very wet conditions, and the strategy worked very well for him in that race. Yep. This car is particularly adjustable. You asked about adjustability,
yeah.
And Chapman did design this car. It was nicknamed the Adjust-A-Car. The front suspension is quite unusual. Everything is outboard, even though it's a rocker arm suspension. And the rear is also adjustable. You can see there's a long spacer, about 8 inches long, between the engine and the gearbox. And they could adjust the wheelbase by removing that spacer and putting in a shorter spacer and using shorter trailing arms. And they could adjust the track as well by using shorter suspension mounting points in the back and by adjusting the front. So they abandoned it halfway through the season, but at the beginning of the 1976 season, Chapman was trying to address the fact that a tight circuit like Monaco, you're better with a shorter wheelbase and a narrow wheelbase. A high-speed circuit like Spa, you're better with everything wider and longer. So he was trying to do that with this car. I believe the lap record here at Laguna Seca in a modern IndyCar or F1 car is something like a minute 7 seconds. I think that's what it is. And these cars, these 30-year-old cars, especially the ground effects cars, are lapping at less than 15 seconds above that. So it's remarkable that cars this far back in technology are still doing those kinds of lap times. Yeah, I'm doing 25s, minute 25-second laps, which is, I think I'm in the top 3 or 4 non-ground effects cars in the group this weekend. Let's hope that holds for the race tomorrow. And we've got the World Championship car, that the Lotus 79 that Mario Andretti won the World Championship in, driven by Duncan Dayton this weekend. He was having gearbox problems yesterday, but I understand he'll be back in action tomorrow. So you're going to see a great performance by him against the other ground effects cars that are here this weekend.
Excellent.
Sitting on the grid at Monaco, you think about the history of Monaco. That's such a legendary circuit. The first time I was there, I just remember sitting on the grid waiting for them to give us the five-minute signal to start our engines and go out for the outlap. And you just, you see the buildings, you see everything around you that you've seen so many times on television, and you just think, I can't believe I'm here. It's just a fantastic experience. At other circuits, you just try to get your head into the fact that you're, who's going to be starting around you. We have rolling starts here. In Europe, they do the standing starts, so there's a little more drama. It took me a while to get used to standing starts over there. Here, we generally run with people we know, because it's a fairly small and tight-knit group. So you know who's around you, you know pretty much what they're going to do and what their cars are capable of doing and what you can do. So there is a little bit of strategy depending on where you qualify, where you're starting on the grid, and what circuit you're on. So here it's a larger group than usual. I think we've got about 35 cars on the grid, which is, you know, it's typical to have about 20. So it's going to be a big group starting. And I'm starting 12th, and I think I'm about the 4th quickest non-ground effects car this weekend. So at least I'm near the front. That takes some of the drama out of the first couple of turns.
Yep.
But you still have to go quick to maintain your position. I don't spend a lot of time testing. I did when I first got the car. We set it up. It had not been driven for a few years competitively, so we spent some time testing and making adjustments and making sure everything was in order. At this point, we, of course, changed the gear ratios for each different circuit we go to, and we sometimes change you know, the sway bars and things like that, but most everything else we leave the same. I do have 2 different noses for it. So I have a second nose with slightly larger front wings, and I have a different rear wing for it that's a Delta configuration. That They use both the Delta configuration and the straight configuration during the 1976 season. So sometimes we swap those out for different circuits. Fabricate almost everything. I do have 2 sets of side pods. And the set that's on there now is a set that Clive Chapman happened to still have in stock. He still has some spares from this era, but not everything. So if something does break, you generally have to have it fabricated. Fortunately, the molds are still available and they can be made. And actually, an interesting little factoid, I had the car repainted about 3 years ago, and the same person, the same sign writer, Paul Banham, who painted the JPS cars back in the 70s, is still in Norfolk, England, and so he was still available to do all the lettering on this car by hand about 3 years ago. Nice. And it's great to have that originality, same colors, same artist, and he does all of this freehand. It's just incredible.
And I know that your car also has some connections with classic Team Lotus and things like that. So do they also have the original mechanics come and work on it?
As a matter of fact, they have Bob Dance, who was Jim Clark's mechanic. Bob is still with classic Team Lotus, and he supports the team. And when we do some racing in Europe, great guy. You can imagine the stories he has to tell of back in the 60s and 70s when he was with the team then. And Chris Dinage, who is the crew chief for Classic Team Lotus, was with Team Lotus in the 80s and early 90s. So he was there for that latter period of time and worked with Senna and Mansell and Johnny Herbert and some of the later drivers. So he also has some great stories. They were quite a mischievous crowd, as you might imagine. It just feels so solid on the high-speed corners. I've driven 379s.
Are there more than 3?
There are 5. And Clive Chapman tells me that I've driven more 79s than anybody else, he thinks. But I've driven Duncan Dayton's 79, which is here this weekend. I drove that at the Barber Motorsport event in May. I drove Clive's Andretti 79 at Brands Hatch last year, and then I've driven Clive's Peterson, Ronnie Peterson Lotus 79 at Monza, Algarve, and Spa, and just right at, you know, first time I'd ever driven it was at Spa.
Yep.
And I'd driven the 77 at Spa as well. I was immediately 4 seconds quicker in the 79 than my best time in the 77. Especially on a high-speed circuit like Spa, the ground effects make such a huge difference. And at Monza last month, or in June, going through Parabolica, just to give you an idea, in this car you probably have to feather the throttle through the turn before you get to, you know, on the exit area when you can really put your foot down. The 79, after I got my confidence up, I was able to turn in, squeeze the throttle all the way to the floor, and just keep it there. Nice. And the car just got tighter and tighter. It felt like, you know, I'm going through it, pulling more and more G's, and I'm thinking, I can't believe the car is sticking, but it was. And so I probably went into the turn at maybe 105, 110 miles an hour, and probably came out at 155 or 160, and it just stuck all the way. So it's quite a difference.
So I guess speaking of famous turns, I have to ask you, how is it like going through Eau Rouge? I know there's a famous quote of Jacques Villeneuve saying that the one thing he wanted to do in his racing career was to go through Eau Rouge flat. How's it like in a ground effects and a non-ground effects car?
I haven't done it flat, but the car sticks. You know, it's not so much Eau Rouge. You've obviously got a slight turn at the bottom of the hill, but the car is so loaded because it is the bottom of the hill. Plus, with the ground effects, I find there to be a lot of drama there. I found the drama at Eau Rouge when you come up over the brow of the hill, and you're turning left. And you get, even with the ground effects car, you've got a little bit less grip, and it just takes a lot of concentration to keep your foot down through that left-hander as you're cresting the hill. But you can lose a position if somebody's on your tail and you don't keep your foot down. I wasn't there, but Clive tells me that he liked my car best of the three he drove. He drove a ex-Clark Lotus 25, an ex-Graham Hill Lotus 49, and this car. And I'm told by Clive he came in after one lap, asked for earplugs, and said, I think I'm going to like this. And he did, and he really went on quite a charge, I guess, with it, and was dicing with the Lotus 72, and they I guess got into it very nicely.
Does that terrify you when someone goes and does that?
No, not him. Okay. Although I did ask Clive at the beginning, does he know how to drive a stick? I guess about a year and a half ago, the Automobile Club of Monaco contacted me and said that movie producers wanted to use this car in a movie, and would I mind if they put the movie producers in touch with me. And so I said sure. I thought it was probably some independent documentary film or something. So Marvel Studios calls me up and says, we'd like to use your car. We want to add some realism to the race that we're portraying Tony Stark to be driving in at Monaco. We'd like some real cars there to add that realism. So I agreed, and I lined up 5 of my friends with other Formula One cars from this era, and the footage was shot at a set in Southern California where they recreated portions of the Monaco circuit. Excellent. And I guess they also shot a number of the sequences in Monaco as well. So, so the black car that you see a couple of times momentarily in the movie is this car.
And also, I believe you were credited as being either second or third on the grid.
Third, yes. And Clive Chapman, I believe, is second.
Yeah, which was.
I will tell you that I have a purchase option on the 79 that I drive in Europe, and so I may be acquiring that.
Excellent.
And that is probably at the top of my wish list, although I would love to have a Lotus 25 if I ever win the lottery.
Yeah, and also the fact that they probably don't come up on sales. Is there only, what, 3 of them, 4 of them?
That's right. One did change hands a couple of years ago, but there are only, I think there are actually 5 of them.
Okay.
But yeah, they don't change hands very often.
Cool. Excellent. Well, thanks again, Chris. Thanks for your time, and I'm sure all our readers would love to hear more about this. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.